Well, it was supposed to come out Tuesday night, but the word has gotten out, breaking news, and we've got it on Dog Post as well. We finally found out who will be playing Georgia for the next 4 years at least in these rotating matchups, the three SEC teams that the Dogs are going to get. We already knew about the Gators. We already knew about Auburn. Who is the third team? There's plenty of speculation it would come down to Kentucky and South Carolina, but today we found that it'll be South Carolina for the next 4 years. I'm going to go over this with you. There's some nuance involved here, so stick with me during this. Dean Legge, another edition of Dog Post, this time sponsored by our buddies, brought to you by our buddies at Freebird Drink Freely. I'm going to talk to you about that in a second here, but here's the thing. Georgia will play the Gators, Auburn, and South Carolina over the next 4 years, so 26, 7, 8, and 9. We know that those games will be played. I've got a lot of ties at South Carolina and at Clemson from my years going to college in the state. This was a game that South Carolina was going to lose its mind over if they did not get it. They view Georgia as their number 2 rival. We've gone over this a million times. Georgia has 3 rivals. They are Tech, Auburn, and the Gators. That's it. Everything else is a big game or games you play a lot. Georgia will not play Tennessee for the next 4 years, which is, disappointing, I think is one way to put it. But we're at where we're at with this thing, and there's just not much you can do about it. The SEC's got 16 teams, and, this is why we're seeing Georgia and Alabama play for the first time in 10 seasons in Athens. So it's one of those things where you've got, if you are the Southeastern Conference, you've got to get the best possible, games that you can get each season. You can't cancel Georgia, Florida. Georgia, Florida is going to play no matter if it's an SEC game or not. I'm going to tell you that right now. I just ran my 3 miles for the day. This is Freebird Southern Spring Water from the Blue Ridge Mountains. I know a thing or two about the Blue Ridge Mountains. My mother grew up there. And Mama always said to drink more water. So this weekend, when y'all are having fun at tailgates, let's mix in some Freebirds along the way. Kirby wants y'all, he says, at peak performance at night. That means you need to be hydrated. We're going to drink Freebird. We're going to mix that into some of our other activities, okay? Make sure it's still going to be hot during the day. I think the other thing, speaking of being hot, the South Carolina game, we don't know when these games are going to be. We do not know when these games are going to be. And I think that's another thing. It is not out of the realm of possibility that Georgia opens at South Carolina. That has happened many times. The league will use, I'm going to stop saying the word they. The word they is used too often in our vernacular. The league will use any excuse to play a game at any particular time. I mean, Georgia and Florida have nailed down their area of time, but even they moved theirs over the years. So the Dogs are going to get Auburn, Florida, and Carolina. The Gators get Georgia, Kentucky, and Carolina. Tennessee is going to get Alabama, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. So Tennessee kept all 3 of their traditional rivals. They kept all 3. And I'm sure they're happy they're not playing Georgia and Florida every year. I'll just say that. I think Tennessee got out okay in this whole thing. Texas got the 3 people that wanted to play them the most, which is A&M, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Alabama got Auburn, Tennessee, and State, which I think is reasonable. LSU got Ole Miss, which they were going to keep Ole Miss no matter what. A&M and Arkansas, so sort of a funky one there with LSU. They do not have the Gators anymore. I know they were both very excited about that. Let's see. Missouri, they're going to get Arkansas, Oklahoma, and A&M, so somewhat like they were back in the Big 12, except they add Arkansas. I think the league did about all it could do here. I mean, there's just, you could say Georgia got a pretty good draw if you're going on 2025. If you're basing it on 2025, they got a pretty good draw. They got 2 teams that are at 500 or lower, and they play Auburn. Now, I want to go through some of the nuance with you about this because there are some things that are true about 2026 and beyond that need to be kept into perspective. One of the reasons why the Southeastern Conference says they're saying that the annual opponents are based on these factors. They said traditional rivalries. So final week matchups, Auburn, Alabama, Mississippi State, and Mississippi. Those games. Neutral site games, Texas and Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida. historical long-time series. And they're saying 10 matchups of these yearlies are among 10 matchups among the annual opponents in the new schedule have been played more than 100 times. Well, Auburn, Georgia is one of those. That was not going to get let go. And then they're saying additional considerations were competitive fairness and geography, saying 80% of annual opponents are in the same or a contiguous state. So you don't have Missouri, Georgia anymore. That game just, that game really is annoying to me for a lot of reasons. Here's the nuance that everyone needs to pay attention to. Stand by. So in a 4-year period, Georgia is going to play Kentucky twice. In a 4-year period. They are not necessarily going to play Kentucky in back-to-back years. So that means that Georgia could play at Kentucky next year or in Athens and then not play them in the return game until 2029. Okay, we're cool there? So Georgia, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, and Georgia, South Carolina could be a situation where, we know that, I don't know what South Carolina is going to be. I would have to do some math on that. But almost certainly, people are going to lose their minds. Josh Brooks would lose his job if Auburn doesn't play in Athens next year. That would be a couple back-to-backs. That's just not going to happen in a 20-year period where they play twice at Auburn in a row. That's not going to happen. In fact, I know from, not hearsay directly that the university would really like to get Auburn in a back-to-back. I don't see how that's going to happen right now, but I don't want to speak. But they're certainly not playing at Auburn. So, you've got Georgia, Florida is going to be in Atlanta and then in Tampa and then back in Jacksonville. So you're going to have some funkiness to 26 and 7, and things will start to settle back down in 28. But each school will play every other SEC opponent at least once every 2 years. Okay? Each school will play every other SEC opponent at least twice home and away for a 4-year period. So let me make sure. Each school will play every other SEC opponent at least twice over a 4-year period. So they are not necessarily going to line these things up, to where we know for sure it's a particular way. If I know the people at the league, they'd love that. They would love to schedule things out. But we're just not in that position right now. Here's another piece of information that everybody needs to know. It says from the SEC, schools with 5 home conference games in 2026 will play 4 home conference games in 27 and will alternate similarly in years going forward. Yada, yada, yada. Same thing with so they'll basically alternate. It says home and away determination for 2026 was made with the goal of providing each school 7 home games while balancing existing annual non-conference rivalry commitments, i.e. Tech, Georgia, Florida, Florida State, Kentucky, Louisville, and Clemson, South Carolina. The only exceptions to every team having 7 home games in their schedule relates to the 2 neutral site games, Georgia, Florida, and Oklahoma, Texas. Each school will have 7 home games in their campus if all 3 non-conference opponents are scheduled at home. So it is challenging. There's no question that it is challenging for the Southeastern Conference to pair this up as best they can. To me, South Carolina being on the schedule makes a lot of sense. It makes far more sense than playing anybody in the West. And when I mean West, I mean west of Auburn. You could have gotten Vanderbilt. You could have gotten Kentucky. There was plenty of speculation it was going to be Kentucky. But I know that, okay, the South Carolina folks were about to lose their mind. And they don't have much say or pull. They're one of 16, and they're not overwhelmingly one of 16. Overwhelmingly powerful. So for Carolina, it was important to get that game. They also, I have to say, I don't think South Carolina wound up with a horrible situation. They get Georgia and Florida. They weren't going to get, getting Tennessee was asking way too much. So that's about all they can kind of go for. Those are 2 of the closest schools to Columbia, certainly Georgia. And, I think it works out great for them. For Georgia, you know, it's just it does nothing. It's like you're playing in the SEC East from years ago, except you're going to mix in some Texas and some Oklahoma and A&M and all this. Like, you know, at some stage Georgia's going to play at A&M. They're going to play at LSU. They're going to play at Oklahoma. They're going to play at Arkansas or wherever. I mean, you know, Georgia's not played at Arkansas for a live game. Well, they've not played in Fayetteville in forever, since '09. So that they played at Arkansas in 14 and 20, but 20 was such mishmash because of COVID that one was kind of hard to take seriously, I guess you could say. So I think we are at where we're at here with this thing. I think for Georgia, you know, it had to be Florida and Auburn. And then in 2030, they probably, I mean, I don't know. I don't think they will change this. It is possible that Tennessee, and Georgia never play yearly again. In fact, for the time being, I would not expect Tennessee, Georgia to play anything other than every other year, or 2 of every 4 years. And I think that same thing goes for Georgia and every other school. The 2 games that are meaningful and matter the most are the 2 games that they kept, which are the Gators and Auburn. Everything else, it's just not the same. It's not. And I'll say the same thing about Auburn, Alabama and Auburn, Tennessee. That's not the same as Auburn, LSU, Alabama, LSU. And it's not the same as Auburn, LSU. There are particular games that need to happen. A&M, Texas, Auburn, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama. These are the kind of games, LSU, Ole Miss. These are the kind of games that were going to go to the wayside if we didn't watch out. And I think that for me, the league did all they could. It's certainly not ideal, but it's better than 8-1. And I've got some more stuff on our next video, or what we're hearing about all sorts of stuff leading up to the 2026 season, and the ramifications of this for future scheduling, as well as some stuff for the Alabama week. Make sure you're checking that out tonight. Thanks for watching.